The other part that ties in with this is that she's concerned about influence and impact of others on her daughter, on her children, period, on her daughters, and I think this is something that all parents that love their children and want them to make the right decisions go through. They are concerned about influence from other people who have different beliefs, of course. Ultimately, as parents, we have to know that our children are our children, but they are themselves. They make their own decisions, and they they're not clones of us, basically. So they're not going to do everything that we do and believe everything that we believe and feel the same way that we feel. So they can be raised a certain way, but they can make a decision easily to either follow what they've been raised in or to do the opposite or something different from that. So, but at the same time, a big concern of hers is she is concerned about, like, if her daughters can be impacted to believe that their hair should be covered, could they be convinced to do other things? And that leads into like drinking, and I'm not going to get into all the other stuff. She's concerned about them being possibly easily influenced by other people. So I mentioned earlier how all of our children are homeschooled, and they have. So I know people may think, well, they're homeschooled, so they weren't around a lot of other children. That's not the case, because in the area that they live in, there's quite a few families that have decided to homeschool their children, and they have really big. It's a big community of homeschool children in their households. So they literally go on field trips together. They go to, it's actually a beautiful, I don't want to say organization, because that sounds so business-like or whatever, but it's a community. It's a beautiful community of homeschooling that they have. So they do a lot of things together, the different households. They have even different groups of homeschool families. And then within that group, there's a large number of children and parents. And then there's other groups, and they have events where all the groups get together. And it's like humongous, actually. It's, so it's not that they're not used to being around other children. That's not it. So that's another thing that's to keep in mind, when thinking, when I explain all of this. It's not that they were homeschooled and they were always in their house and they weren't around other children. No. As a matter of fact, they probably do more than public school children as far as interacting with other children outside of school, doing events and everything. They are constantly, interacting with other children and other cultures and all of that. So, and when I homeschooled my children too for their early years, if we had that type of network back then, I would have homeschooled them all the way. But back then, I was really struggling, to find, a community for that, because a lot of people were not homeschooling, not to the magnitude that her community and surrounding communities of hers are. I mean, they're really into it. They've created a really wonderful system of homeschooling. So I said all that to say that it's not because they're not used to being around other children. My goodness, they have kids over all the time. They go over to their friends' houses. That's not it. She's just concerned and surprised because of that. I mean, they've had that community. They have a lot of interactions with other children, other cultures, and all of that. She's just confused as to why now, and what's happening with that. And it was just, again, when she saw them, she was happy to see them, but man, and when she described it to me, I felt that pain that she felt in her gut. And I want her to just to be able to work through it, and to know that she's an excellent mom. It hurts me that she's judging herself and thinking that she's done something wrong. She hasn't done anything wrong. Her daughters have just made a decision that is outside of the way that she raised them. And it's not like, they're doing anything illegal or anything like that. It's just that it doesn't conform with the way she raised them. And she is concerned about outside influences. I went to university too, and I know that environment. I was a nerd, and they always thought that they can get over on me, but just because I, didn't do a lot of things that they did, they were always trying to get me to drink. And, I'm not going to go into all of that, but I know the outside forces, on campus. I fully get that. And you really have to have a strong constitution about yourself to not give into it, because there's so much that is right there at your feet. You have to be strong and not bow to those temptations, or some of them are not even temptations, just people throwing stuff that they do in your face. So, but I do understand her linking her daughters deciding to wear synthetic hair. I get how she's linking that to, like, would they be influenced to do other things? So when she was talking to me about all of that, I get that. And I understand that concern. I remember when I was in university, my mom, she would ask me like questions about all kinds of stuff. And I'm thankful I was very honest with her about what was really going on. This is off track. I don't know if I should say this. Maybe I'll talk about that another time. Anyway, I'm getting a little loose lip here. I'm not going to even go into that. So, the topic is, raising Black children to love themselves fully. And in I can't even just say in the U.S., in this country, it's really worldwide. Black parents, it's a job. I would say it's a little like difficult sometimes to figure out how to do that, because how to be successful at it. So you can, when you're raising your Black children, you can, because like today, there are a lot of, when they're real little, like animation shows that are Black oriented. Back in the day, there were none. So when I say it can be difficult, when you're raising Black children and everything, like from the shows that they watch when they're kids to learn, they have their ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and all of that. And everything that they see is like non-Black, like the cartoon characters, all of it. And that has an impact. Just that simple thing, that visual of this Black child watching a show with all non-Black characters, that has an impact. That has an influence on that young Black child's mind. And that's important. And that's why today I am glad to see there aren't enough of them still, but there are Black oriented children's shows. And that's important. If that was around when, back in the day, I think that a lot of Black parents that have that mindset, like I do, would have their children watching those shows. Because I know some Black parents don't think that deep into it, don't think it's really wrong, or that it's not important for their children, their little babies, to watch Black oriented programming, but it's important and it's impactful. It has an effect, and that's important. And to everything a Black child sees on TV is oriented to a particular ideology. It just is. That's the way it's always been, and Black parents have to constantly counter that. It's constant work, that you have to counter that, because if you sit and you let them be raised by society, they will hate themselves. It's that simple. They will hate themselves, and they will hate themselves and not even realize that they're hating themselves. So because they'll take on an ideology or embrace an indoctrination about themselves, because that's what indoctrination really is. You don't really realize that you've been like so heavily influenced by an ideology until it just becomes just the way you think and move in life, and not really realizing that you were, I don't know if the word is brainwashed into believing that. And so, raising Black children, you really have to be on your toes constantly. And sometimes, a parent is successful. Sometimes, I shouldn't even say it like that, because it's not an easy thing. Raising children, period. It's, I'm going to give an example of something. When I was in high school, I had a friend, and her dad, I should get into this too. Her dad, okay, let me say this. And the reason why I'm bringing up this example, I'm talking about like raising children and how raising Black children specifically. But I'm also talking about like when somebody raises a child, they could raise their child to like dislike certain people. And basically, my friend, that's what her dad was doing. Basically, I'll just say I think her father was like a card-carrying Nazi. I really do. And the thing is this. So when we were young, our house was like the house. Everybody, they loved our parents, and our friends would come over there, and we would have a ball, and so when this friend in particular, when she would come over, she was just like, she was right at home. She was at home. She was either in the kitchen bothering my mom while she was cooking. My mom would tell her to get out, leave her alone, in a playful way, not a mean way. But it's just like my mom was talking to one of us. Or she would be, playing with my younger siblings, running around the house. Or she would be playing Atari with me or me and my brother. I mean, she was at home when she was over at our house. And I never really thought about the fact that I had never gone to her house, because we hardly ever did that anyway, because everybody was always over at our house. So we were heading out one evening to go see a movie. We loved horror flicks. I mean, we saw like every Jason, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. When those came out, we saw those opening night because we were so geeked to see them. I mean, so that's what we were headed out to do. And she had left her wallet. I had picked her up, and we were headed there. And she said, I forgot my wallet. And this girl could talk. She was always talking. Like, I don't want to say motor mouth, but that's what she had. But I noticed on our way back to her house, I remember I could see her right now. I turned to my right and I looked at her. The reason why I looked over at her is because she was quiet. And that's very unusual. I'm just used to the hum tone of her voice constantly. And she had leaned her head up against the door, and she was looking out the window, and she was quiet. And I said, I'm not going to say her name. I said, what's wrong? And she just said, nothing. And she was, telling me where to turn and stuff, because her parents, they had just bought a new house. So she was guiding me to where, to their house. And I just thought the energy shift was like, I was like, man, what's going on? And I didn't quite know what was happening until we got to her house and I met her father. And that's when I knew what that was all about. First, when the door opened, this guy was humongous. For one, he probably was like 6'4", probably like 300 pounds. He was big. And when you walked in, the living room was right there, and there was a wall separating the living room from the kitchen, and that wall had a humongous bookcase, and full of books. And spotted throughout that bookcase were binders that had swastikas on them. And I noticed that, and my friend, she said, I'm going to go get my wallet. And, I had met her mother before. I had never met her father. That was my first time meeting him at their old house. I had met the mom once, and she gave me a big hug and stuff. But I felt the energy of her father, and he shook my hand. He had humongous hands, and his hands were like sweaty, and I, felt like wiping my hand off. But I didn't want to, seem rude or whatever. So, I stood there and talked with him for a moment. And then her mom said, she told me, she said, her room is right down, just go down that hallway and blah, blah, blah. So I went in there, and my friend was like so nervous. She was really acting nervous and all that. And I've never ever seen her like that. I mean, I had known her for like 2-3 years at this point. And it was just a weird situation. So she finds her wallet, and she's like, she literally grabs my hand. She finds her wallet, and she's pulling me because she wants to leave. And, her dad was sitting in the living room. He's just sitting there sort of staring. And her mom was like, nice to see you again, blah, 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 those kind of pleasantries. And we went and we got back in the car. And when I looked over at her, I realized she was sweating. And I was like, man, this is crazy. So backed out the driveway. The energy got back a little, like it was. We went to see the movie, enjoyed the movie. And after the movie, she kept saying sorry, and we talked, and she explained some things. And my point about bringing that up as far as parenting is that she was being presented something that was going against her personal grain. She has a younger sister, and she expressed that her younger sister was accepting the teachings of her father. And a lot of things really sort of made sense at this point, because she did have a lot of arguments and conflict with her father. And now at that point, I had an idea of what was going on. Again, to get back to the parenting, my point is that in that situation, something was presented to her, and she chose not to accept that, to follow that, to live that, to think that, to feel that. She made a choice to not do that. And that, falls in line with any parent, that's all we can do is present an idea. So he may have felt like a failure because, his daughter is bringing over her. We were like best friends. We were very, very close. And I'm, a black woman. So, he may have felt like he was a failure because that's not what he wanted. It's funny, up until that point, whenever I had called over to her house, I would always end up speaking to her mom. I had never spoken to him at all. And after meeting him, um, he would answer the phone. I don't know what was going on before, but and he would talk to me. But his conversations always led to something of a racial nature. I don't care what topic he brought up, if it was about a car, if it was about a book, whatever. He always inserted something racial in it. And so I really did not want to talk to him. I hardly ever called over there. She was mainly always calling over to our house. But that's an example of a child not following what they're being taught at home. Now, that can be a good thing or a negative thing. A parent could be trying to raise their child to lead a good life, and then they could, decide to do other things that are not what the parent wants. That's best for their child. They could, decide to drink and go out and do all other kind of stuff. So, or they could be raised by someone like her father and decide to not accept that. So people are individuals. And like with my friend, her daughters are individuals. They made a decision to, wear the synthetic hair. I don't know what's going on. I know that I'm sure they've talked about it at this point. And I know that eventually she'll talk to me about it. She may want me to talk to them. It makes me feel good that they all do appreciate my opinion on things. Not saying I know, everything or anything like that. It's just that they like to sometimes get my view on something. So that may happen. But to make a long story short, and I've already made it long, I just want her to feel good about herself. I just don't want her to think of herself as a failure, because she's not a failure. She's an excellent mom. Like I said, she has 3 children in college right now. Another may be going in. This one, I don't know. This one could be the youngest one to enter. They're very smart people. Okay, very smart. All of them. Dad, mom, kids, super smart people. But they're very successful. They're very successful parents. Even with her children, her daughters making the decision that they've made, and he is still very successful, very good, nurturing parents. And I just don't want her to judge herself off of this one thing. Again, I understand why she believes it, because I believe the same thing, but it's not a reflection of anything that she's done wrong. It's just a decision that they've made as an individual, just like my friend did. It's a decision that they've made, for themselves. So, I do want to say this really, really, really quick. I know there are people who, like, they, wear the fake lashes, the fake hair, all of that. And they say that they love themselves. And I know I've had people tell me, and some of them got really angry and said that I do love myself, but they have, their hair is constantly covered with a wig or weave. They wear the big lashes. They will not step outside. They won't even walk down to the mailbox without something on, like flopping a wig on or something like that. This is my opinion. That's their opinion. My opinion is that if a person feels that way about themselves, they don't love themselves. They simply do not, because they're constantly trying to cover up themselves. They're constantly trying to cover up their features. And that's not, to me, that's not self love. That's actually self hate. I've seen, um, like, Instagram reels and stuff, because I'm not really on Instagram, um, where they show me where black women, and it's so sad, young black women, older black women, black children, saying how much they hate their hair. They say my hair is ugly. I hate my hair, and all of that. You know, that's really, 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 really sad to me. My God, that's just like, what are we doing wrong? We're doing something wrong for our children to think that way about themselves. That's not right. No matter how your hair comes up out of your follicles on your scalp, it's beautiful and it's you. And it's not something to be covered up. My God. We have to do better as a community, the black community, we have to do better. To have our children hating themselves like that is just insane to me.